Okay, first of all, I want to just thank everybody for voting for this presentation because this is a bit of therapy for me. And I really appreciate you for it because wireless systems performance engineer, and I've been dealing with a lot of forward compatibility problems. And I don't want to just sit here and rant to you, so I thought, what can I do? How can I share this information? This is a great venue to share this information in a way to make an ask of you all in here. So this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to skim through some forward compatibility bugs. I'm going to discuss the common issues that they raise. I'm going to suggest mitigations for those issues, and then I'm going to ask for your help in getting those mitigations into the ecosystem, right? The themes of this talk are to protocol is to be human, right? With all the foibles that exist in that. There's a tension between compatibility fixes and simplicity, and more complexity means more bugs. So this is just a small little snapshot of various compatibility problems that have kind of made me tear my hair out. In the transition from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6, those of you who have been in the industry a while will remember that there was a client driver that didn't recognize the HE elements in Wi-Fi 6, and even worse, Wi-Fi 6 didn't even show up in the scan list, right, which made a huge problem. And one of the great things about being here is people have teed up this talk, so people have already talked about security. In 6 gigahertz, there's standard power LPI. People initially thought, oh, I just need one or the other, and people started to realize, oh, no, we need a composite mode. That had to be fixed. And then issue that Gaurav already raised, which is this R1 forward compatibility piece. I'm going to very quickly just sort of go into these two. And again, there will be a talk tomorrow about this personal compatibility mode. This is, if I want to advertise these 3 securities, right, in a single SSID, this is what I'm going to have to do, right, currently. Before this compatibility mode existed, you combine it all, but we all know that some legacy clients just refuse to connect, right? And so what they did, the personal compatibility mode kind of separated things out into these elements. Again, you're going to hear more about this tomorrow. This is awesome. I want to say it's a good thing. I appreciate what it's done. We are going to implement this. But there are costs to doing this, right? There's not just the cost of having to get all of the client firmware updated so that the clients that currently use WPA3 will be able to use WPA3 with this. That's one cost, right? But there's some hidden costs with this as well, right? There's uncertainty, right? That multiple RSN, kind of those multiple security overrides, that's a really cool mechanism for advertising multiple securities in the same SSID. Right now, that's really only clearly defined for pre-shared keys, right? The personal compatibility mode. It's really focused around that. Will it extend to other things? We don't know. I've heard proposals about extending that. The other piece of this is implementation complexity, right? Now code, implementation code, there's 2 code paths. There's extra code that has to go through. Extra code means more potential for bugs, right? So that's the security piece, right? I'm going to dive into this Wi-Fi 7 R1, R2 forward compatibility issue. This is the exact extended MLD capabilities element. Prior to Wi-Fi 7 R2, it was reserved. But Wi-Fi 7 R1 implementations expected all of those reserved bits to be 0, right? And when a Wi-Fi 2 devices showed up and set those bits to 1, the Wi-Fi 7 APs barfed, or some of the Wi-Fi 7 APs barfed, and wouldn't admit the Wi-Fi 7 R2 client. So this is One of the advantages of being in the Wi-Fi 7 testbed is we actually realized this pretty early on and have gotten a fix in there. But one of the things, when this was discovered, one of the things that was proposed out there was this concept of, we're going to be perfectly backward compatible. People wanted to be backward compatible to those broken R1 APs, right? They went in and said, okay, you won't actually set those reserved bits initially. Instead, what you'll do is you'll include an Wi-Fi 7 R2 flag in both the client and AP. And once those R2 devices realize they're talking to each other, then you'll set the extended MLD capability, right? And then at that point, you go into kind of your R2 mode and exchange R2 information, right? That didn't go through, but ultimately it was solved by saying everybody had to update their firmware, right? And there's now, I believe there's a test for that. So 2 ways of approaching forward compatibility problems, right? Why does it matter? It matters because, right, Wi-Fi is a human endeavor, right? This is how the complexity of the standard has evolved over the years. This graph here, right, this is when an amendment made it into the full spec. So these are the page numbers of the full spec. So 11AX there. Of course, that was released in 2019, 2020 timeframe, but then when it was merged into the full standard, that's where it came, and you can see the complexity of this is shooting up, right? And I've just told you that trying to solve compatibility issues through protocol, right, it introduces more complexity and more uncertainty, right? And the more we can limit bugs and compatibility bugs, the more we can reduce complexity and reduce uncertainty. Right, so how do you go about doing that? Right, so here's the mitigations. You want to catch them, right? You want to catch the bugs, and you want to catch them with testing, right? And so you're testing devices against the setting of reserved bits and reserved fields. You're testing devices against unknown options like new AKMs that don't even exist, right? And this is where I'm going to give a shout out to Wi-Fi Alliance, right, that are developing prerequisite tests for compatibility testing there. And I also need to give a shout out to the Wi-Fi Alliance because it almost makes me cry. Like every time I go to a Plug Fest or every time I go to an Interop event, I'm like, I look around the room and there's all of these competitors in the same room ensuring that the ecosystem is working, right? And is working well. And it's very cool to see that cooperation. And then, of course, you can go in and you can fix compatibility bugs with firmware updates. And APs and clients need a way to update their firmware. If there's a compatibility bug, they need to get new firmware and update it. And if you have these 2 things, it limits the need for backward compatibility protocol fixes, which limits uncertainty and complexity. So where do you come in? Need you to lobby and set expectations both in the industry and external to the industry, right? Within the industry, people need to know that forward compatibility tests are important, that these tests aren't sexy, but they need to be prioritized, right? External to the industry with your customers and things, right? Certification, it's a human endeavor. Certification is never perfect, it never will be. It's getting better, right? But it provides a baseline of sanity for your systems. If your networks, and I'm going to repeat this, you've already heard this, if your networks and your customer networks have WFA certified devices, they will be better, right? So there's no expectation of perfect backward compatibility, right? You should, as best you can, have an expectation that clients can update their firmware. Old clients with bugs that don't have firmware updates and can't get updated firmware are a security risk. So at that point, you really need to create another second SSID, second WLAN for backwards compatibility and for client isolation, right? So here's your flow chart, right? You start at the top, and are your devices WFA certified, right? In either case, you might have compatibility problems, but it's a lot less likely if they are certified, right? If you don't currently have compatibility problems? Awesome. If you do, can you fix them with a firmware upgrade? If you can, great. If you can't, then are those devices essential to the network? If they're not, great, take them out of the network, remove your problem, right? If those devices are essential, right, then create a second isolated WLAN that's specifically there for backward compatibility. So in review, like the Wi-Fi industry standard, you should limit backward compatibility fixes because it increases complexity, it increases uncertainty. It's not that you should never do it. And you can help by lobbying for compatibility testing and setting the right expectations for network configuration. So thank you for your therapy session. I really appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate this room and everybody here. Thank you.